I do think we are facing, as a planet, some very, very disturbing and challenging set of issues. If you go back to the late 18th century, when you think about the move from rural to urban, when you think about the Industrial Revolution, when you think about Thomas Malthus's concerns about overpopulation, some of these themes were there then, but we now know the impact on the planet. We now know the extraordinary extent of the digital revolution. We now know the degree to which trade is a global phenomenon. So the speed of change is quickening. And when we think about how we have to educate our young people for a hyper-connected, increasingly globalized world and the demands it will make on them, both as citizens, as individuals, and as prospective wealth creators, it's absolutely clear that some of the traditional industrial models of schooling are not going to provide that. When it comes to the types of individual that we're producing out of our education system, we also know that those young people who are involved in teamwork, those young people who are involved in collective endeavour, then go on to be much more involved in civic participation. They go on to vote more regularly. They go on to participate in social groups more regularly. So it's a self-fulfilling process, and in and of that self, they then gain extra skills and aptitudes and attitudes which are going to help them in the long run. So I think building up that sense of teamwork and collective endeavour at a school level, both in school and the clubs and associations around school, is absolutely fundamental. I think generating empowerment in schools is absolutely fundamental. The best schools have really active school councils. The best schools have active elections. They have democracy. They teach a culture of citizenship, not as a lesson with an uninterested history teacher on a Friday morning, but as part and parcel of the ethos of the school. And that is going to give young people the skills and the confidence and the approach which is going to serve them incredibly well in the economy and society of tomorrow. But I think it's also going to make them a richer person in the long run. My concern with education at the moment is that we almost put too much on the teachers and the schools. Historically, schools were part of a much broader ecology of growth. Young people were involved in sports leagues, they're involved in scouts, they're involved in churches and chapels and religious organisations that connected with school but wasn't limited to school. So I think there is room for reform in schools in terms of how and what we teach. But I would also say we can't just put it all on to teachers and schools. Actually, we know young people benefit enormously from interacting with adults who aren't teachers or parents, but in youth clubs, in sports clubs, in music clubs. And that's the area I think that we're missing out so much of at the moment. I think what we want from teachers is their ability to own the curriculum and develop the curriculum. If you've got a sense of ownership over you're going to produce greater outcomes. But any national education system has to have some basic parameters around it. And we've certainly seen in some schools in England attitudes and approaches that the taxpayer should not be funding. So it's a mix between how a taxpayer-funded education system runs a state education system and also the professional leeway given to teachers who know their classes best, who are qualified professionals in their areas, who do deserve the respect and the support and the encouragement from politicians. You do need assessment. In the UK, we're spending £50 billion a year on the education sector. We have to make sure that public money is spent wisely and appropriately. What I'm concerned about is to ensure that you have a sense of professional ownership over assessment. We need to see more teachers and head teachers involved in our inspectorate, but we also need to see teachers and head teachers inspecting one another in an atmosphere of absolute rigour, but also professional support and debate and encouragement. And you can get that process right, and hopefully we're on that pathway now. I think what's really exciting at the moment is the level both of public and professional interest in education policy making. Parents are interested and engaged. Teachers are on Twitter, on Facebook, are on the net. Policymakers are exchanging ideas around the world. This is a really rich time for policy making. I would urge policymakers, though, to place the school within a broader context, that what happens behind the school gates in and of itself is not enough if we want to challenge inequality and challenge disadvantage and get the best out of our young people. And there's been, I think, a narrowness of approach sometimes in terms of education policy development, and we have to place the school within the community, within the family, within contours of parenting, even within the local economic area, to think about education in that more holistic way. I'm a very strong supporter of distributive policy making, in that we want parents involved in their schools, we want governors involved in their schools, we want young people through school councils and other systems to be involved in their schools. We want a consultative approach by the professionals in it. Yes, you need leadership, and you need strong leadership, and you need to make decisions, absolutely. But I also think we could have, in many ways, a more interactive relationship between policymakers, parents, pupils and professionals.